McLaren Automotive has a bit of a problem on their hands. And if they don't act fast, the future of the brand might be uncertain in the next couple of years. But if McLaren knows how to do anything, it's make something that goes fast. Really fast. This is the McLaren 750S. It's the successor to their previous flagship supercar, the 720S, which is one of the most beloved supercars of the last 5 years. It's gorgeous, it's outrageously fast, and it's actually somewhat usable for daily driving. But is this finally the car to save McLaren?
Well, I can spoil that for you now. Of course not, but that doesn't mean we should write this car off. The 750S is basically McLaren nearly perfecting their formula. It's 66 pounds lighter than the 720S and with 22 extra horsepower. You've got increased downforce and better aerodynamic balance. Overall, there's a lot of little changes that they made to this car that adds up to be a much more refined car than the 720S. And we're gonna dig into all of that. But first, let's talk about the car that I think will actually save McLaren. I recently got to visit a Lamborghini dealership, and man, the vibes in there were absolutely immaculate. I got to speak to the manager who was talking about the new Revuelto and saying that the Huracan replacement was gonna have a V8 that revs to like 10,000 RPM, all this wild stuff, and saying that generally speaking, it's a great time to be in the Lambo business. And that's all thanks to one car, the Audi RSQ8. Also known as the Lamborghini Urus. Lamborghini took a relatively low-effort approach with developing a super SUV that shares a lot of parts with a sporty version of the Audi Q8, including the engine and transmission. They gave it a custom tune and Lamborghini styling treatment, and now it's the most successful Lamborghini of all time. In 2023, Lamborghini sold more Uruses alone than McLaren sold cars, period.
Ferrari caved and built the Puro Sangue after they said they'd never do it, so I think the writing is on the wall here. McLaren is probably up next. But we don't have to act like making an SUV is a bad thing. A lot of people need an SUV at the end of the day. So today we're going to talk about why the 750S is proof that McLaren could build the best super SUV of them all.
Alright, so I thought I'd start this video with a launch control, and as opposed to a regular launch control where you just sit there and like scream like a little girl, I thought I would take a different approach and see how many letters I can spell in the alphabet before basically I hit like 60 or a higher number. So let's do that right now. We're gonna put it into launch control mode. We are in auto. Forget it. Forget it. It's your brain just gets scrambled. You can't. Oh. Okay. I tried.
McLaren's Ricardo-built V8s are known to be some of the most capable 4-liter motors out there, and the 750S is the perfect example of that. I'm personally bored of a lot of other turbocharged V8 motors out there, and that's because they're all the same. Twin turbos, cross-plane crank setup, 7,000 RPM redline. It's the same thing in a lot of these cars. But this 750S is using a flat plane crank V8, which allows this engine to rev all the way up to 8,500 RPM. Now imagine this motor or something similar in an SUV. There would simply be nothing else like it on the road.
The torque in this car is also bananas. 590 pound-feet of torque, pushing 3,100 pounds, feels like, yeah, it feels like a lot. And if this motor were to go into an SUV, the engine would probably need some stroking, pause, and some bigger turbos to accommodate for the higher weight of the car. But honestly, that's really all you would need. This power plant has proven itself for well over a decade. It's so much more fun and engaging than the 911 Turbo's motor, and definitely a lot faster than the Huracan V10s. It's the most interesting. I will say the boost doesn't really kick in until you hit about like 4,500 RPM. That's something I wasn't really expecting. I thought the boost was going to kick in a lot lower in the rev range, but once it does hit, you are off to the races, and it kind of gives you this feeling of like anticipation when you finally understand how the boost works and when it's going to kick in. You're like, all right, let's get this thing to 3.5 grand to 4,000, because that's when you know that's where the fun begins. And boy, is it a lot of fun. This car is astronomically fast, which you know, that kind of goes without saying. It's a freaking 740 horsepower car. And the sounds this thing makes, right? The center exit exhaust that is mostly inspired from the McLaren P1, it sounds fantastic. We have it in sport mode right now, but if we put the car into track mode, which I think changes this a little bit, it gets even louder, and I think it should shoot some flames. That is nasty. I always wonder what it would be like if McLaren made a naturally aspirated V8 car. They haven't made a naturally aspirated road car since the F1, which was like late 90s, early 2000s. I always wondered what it would be like if they were to do that again. I think it would probably be one of the better sounding V8s out there. Should they do it? I don't know, maybe. McLarens aren't just about the engine and straight line performance though, they also have incredible suspension and steering feel. The suspension tech used in these McLarens honestly doesn't get enough credit for how technically innovative it is.
As opposed to using traditional anti-roll bars for improved rigidity and firmness for cornering, they're using a hydraulic roll control system called Proactive Chassis Control 3. This system utilizes fluid linkages between all four corners of the car to independently control the body based on what's happening. And then you've got flow restrictors on each side of the car to control how much fluid is going to each piston. That controls how the wheels react to the tarmac. So when you're in track mode, you're going to have the highest amount of flow restriction and have a super stiff driving feel. In layman's terms, McLaren suspension technology allows you to take corners at extremely high speeds and almost feel zero body roll.
The suspension tech is so good that Rivian is using a variant or a version of it in their electric pickup truck and SUV, and now Range Rover is using it in their Range Rover Sport SV. So imagine if McLaren put that same suspension tech into an SUV that was meant to be sporty from the get-go. It would instantly outclass every other SUV on a track, and that would matter for all of 7 people who actually track their SUVs. But even still, it would be pretty sick. And then the steering. McLaren has stuck to their guns by continuing to use a hydraulic pump for their steering as opposed to the electronic racks that are used in like the modern BMW M cars, for example, which have a very video gamey synthetic feel that I'm not really a big fan of. And while the pump for the steering is still hydraulic, the motor to control the pump is electronic. So it's an electro-hydraulic system that gives you some of the best steering feel in the game, because unlike a traditional hydraulic steering system, you're not relying on engine speed to control the steering feel. So it has a very modern yet analog and sporty feel that is exactly what you want out of a car like this. It's one of the best steering systems in the game. Porsche is definitely up there, but it's not quite on this level. We've been talking about performance so much that we haven't taken the time to acknowledge how beautiful this car is. McLaren has honestly never missed in terms of design. From the F1 to now, they make absolutely stunning cars. The Lamborghini Urus, it's definitely hit or miss in terms of favorability. The Ferrari Purosangue, I like the way that car looks, but then a lot of people compare it to a Mazda CX-5. And then the BMW XM. I don't think I need to talk about that one, do I? McLaren could come into the game and design the most beautiful super SUV of them all. I've seen some fan renders online of what that car could possibly look like, and it looks okay, but I'm hoping McLaren kind of exceeds fan expectations and delivers like they've always been known to. When you look at these cars from the outside, right, you look at it and it's like a spaceship. It looks like really exotic inside and out, but McLaren has still managed to make this car incredibly comfortable and dailyable for this being a supercar with a carbon tub. And speaking of carbon, I've got the carbon bucket seats ripped straight out of the McLaren Senna, which is an option you can get on this car. And they look very extreme, and they're meant to hold you in place when doing track days and whatnot, but when driving it on the road, it's actually not too bad. Would I want to sit in this car for like 7 hours on a road trip in these bucket seats? Probably not, and you certainly wouldn't have enough fuel to do so anyway, but the comfort level is actually surprisingly really good. The AC works, the AC is great. You've got a Bowers & Wilkins sound system that sounds pretty good. It's on par with pretty much every other luxury car that I've experienced, at least in the two-door, two-seat segment. And then Apple CarPlay, you've got wired at least, but Apple CarPlay, which is, you know, a great creature comfort to have. A lot of supercars are known for just having a really bad interior experience from a functionality standpoint, but McLaren's is honestly pretty darn good. There aren't a lot of complaints you can have when given the structure of the car and what you're working with. You've got pretty much all the creature comforts you can need, and the software itself and the infotainment is actually pretty solid. It's responsive, it's laid out in a way that's very approachable and easy to use. I'm a fan. Another really cool feature that's maintained with the Spider is the electrochromatic roof. So you can option the Spider to have a glass roof panel right up here in the center, but you can also option it to have electrochromatic functionality, which means you hit this button right here, and then it kind of tints the glass roof panel up top, and you might be able to see that in the camera right there, actually. It's a pretty sick feature. It's honestly underrated. It's also incredibly expensive. I think it's like 10 or 12 grand, something like that. Don't quote me, I have to double check, but it's expensive.
So we've gone over what a McLaren SUV would need to drive well and be fast and exciting, but let's talk about what this SUV would need to win, so to speak. And the first aspect of that is the technology. We're not asking for escalated levels of creature comforts, but if we could get the basics for a high-cost, high-performance SUV, like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, wireless and wired, you know, if you can make that happen, a heads-up display, a good built-in software interface, a solid sound system, heated and cooled seats, if we could get all that fun stuff, I think we're in good shape on the technology front. And then there's practicality. We should at least be getting Porsche Macan levels of trunk space and a semi-decently usable second row. Hate on the BMW XM all you want, but you can't deny that that has one of the best second row experiences of any 5-seater SUV I've ever come across. So if we could get something even close to that, I'd be a very happy boy. And lastly, McLaren should just stick to what works. We don't need some fancy schmancy door opening mechanism. We don't need some insane wheel and tire setup that's gonna be impossible to replace in an emergency. Just stick to what works, and I think we'll be in good shape. Now, something I've thought about further into the creation of this video is platform sharing. Now, we all know that McLaren is a bit cash strapped as of lately, and as when I say lately, I mean like the past handful of years. So they clearly don't have the capital to just build their own SUV platform, which means they would more than likely have to platform share. And there are a few companies I could think of that would make as a good partner, but you know, some of those bridges have been burned. So people like BMW come to mind as a platform share. Maybe Audi, Volkswagen, that could be a potential thing, although I'm not sure they would need a McLaren SUV for a platform partner because they have the RSQ8, the Lamborghini Urus, the Cayenne Turbo GT, so that kind of doesn't seem realistic. Really, BMW feels like the most sensible platform sharing partner because, you know, their high-performance XUV hasn't been the most beloved as far as their flagship model. So maybe that is something that could happen in the next handful of years because McLaren just doesn't have the capacity financially, at least right now, to do it on their own. So if they're going to build this, they're going to need a platform partner. Who that's going to end up being, I guess only time will tell. So I didn't actually spend most of this video reviewing the 750S, and that's for two reasons. One being that most of everything you're seeing in this video was shot in the span of 5 to 6 hours, so I haven't actually been able to live with this thing. And two, we pretty much already know the story with this car, which is kind of a part of McLaren's problem. It's an outrageously fast, fantastically designed, and thrilling supercar that's guaranteed to break necks when you're seen on the road and probably stop your heart a little bit when cornering at a speed you didn't know was possible as a novice driver. If you want the best blend of modern technology and analog sporty thrills in a package that not many have access to, this is the car. But will it be the car to save McLaren? Probably not. And I guess that leaves us all wondering, what will? But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future content like this. The next video probably won't be on a supercar, more than likely. I don't get to do this very often, but I'll make sure it's at least good. Okay. Talk to you guys in the next one. So, I guess having this suction cup mounted to the hood of your McLaren and going miles an hour isn't exactly great for the, you know, the camera that you have on there. It flew off and now it's done. So, good.